She could have walked away, and no one would have blamed her. In the final weeks of a brutal war, every stranger looked like a danger, and every wounded enemy meant another risk no ordinary person wanted to take. Leaving him where he lay would have been the safest decision. Instead, one quiet choice, made in less than 10 seconds, would cross an ocean, outlive the war itself, and remain in the heart of one British soldier for the rest of his life. The remarkable part was not that she saved him. The remarkable part was why. The answer lay beneath the ruins of a forgotten German village where almost everything had been destroyed except the quiet courage of one young woman. By the spring of 1945, silence had become the village's most familiar sound. Roofs leaned at impossible angles. Empty homes stood open to the wind. The church bell had not rung for months, and broken windows scattered pale morning light across streets covered with bricks, splintered beams, and abandoned carts. Every footstep echoed because so few voices remained. Anna Keller was 22 years old. Each morning, she left the remains of her family's house carrying a woven basket, searching for anything that could still help someone survive another day. Blankets, canned food, medicine, even dry firewood had become treasures. She moved carefully through collapsed buildings, avoiding unstable walls and cracked beams. Hope was no longer a feeling. It was a routine. Look carefully. Listen closely. Keep moving. That morning, a cool breeze carried dust across what had once been the village square. As Anna stepped around the shattered stone wall of the old church, something unusual caught her attention. At first, she thought it was another bundle of torn canvas buried beneath broken masonry. Then she noticed a hand. It was pale beneath the dust. Completely still. She froze. The sleeve above it carried no German insignia. For several long seconds, she simply stared. Slowly she knelt, brushing away loose dirt until a weathered shoulder patch appeared beneath the torn fabric. A small Union Jack. A British soldier. He looked young, barely older than she was. Dirt covered his face. His eyes remained closed. She leaned a little closer, listening carefully. There. One slow, fragile breath. Relief did not come. Fear did. She looked around the empty square. No one stood nearby. Yet the final weeks of the war had taught everyone that empty places could deceive. Civilians appeared without warning. Retreating soldiers crossed forgotten roads. Trouble often arrived long before anyone heard footsteps. Every instinct urged her to leave. If she walked away now, no one could accuse her of helping the enemy. She slowly stood and took one step backward. Then another. She stopped. The faint sound of his breathing reached her again. It reminded her of another winter years earlier, when her younger brother struggled to breathe through a terrible fever. She remembered sitting beside his bed, counting every breath, praying there would be another one. He had survived that illness, only to be taken by the war years later. For one quiet moment, the ruined village disappeared. She no longer saw an enemy beneath broken stone. She saw someone's son, someone who had once been carried as a child, someone whose family might still be waiting. Anna closed her eyes. The safest choice stood only a few steps behind her. The right one stood in front of her. When she opened her eyes again, the decision had already been made. She crouched beside the wounded soldier, slipped one arm beneath his shoulders, and whispered so softly that even the wind nearly carried the words away. "You are not dying here." He did not answer. Carefully, she pulled him free from the fallen stones, pausing whenever loose rubble shifted beneath their weight. The journey to her family's abandoned cellar was less than 50 yards, yet every step felt longer than the last. Several times she stopped to listen. The village remained quiet. At last they reached the collapsed house. From the outside, nothing suggested anyone still lived there. That was exactly why she had chosen it. The cellar had once stored potatoes, preserves, and sacks of flour through long winters. Now it held damp stone walls, scattered wooden shelves, and the lingering scent of old timber. It was cold, hidden, and forgotten. Perfect. Anna lowered the young soldier onto a worn wool blanket and rested against the wall, catching her breath before looking at him more closely. His jacket was soaked with rain and dust. One sleeve had been torn against broken masonry. His boots showed weeks of marching. As she adjusted his coat, a small leather wallet slipped halfway from an inside pocket. She hesitated. Then she opened it. Inside she found no secret orders or military papers, only a faded family photograph. A smiling woman stood beside two children in front of a brick cottage covered with climbing roses. Anna studied the picture for a moment. She wondered if they already believed he was dead. Quietly, she slid the photograph back into the wallet exactly as she had found it. Using rainwater collected in an old barrel, she dampened a clean cloth and gently wiped the dust from his face. She filled a cracked ceramic cup with fresh water and placed it beside him in case he awakened. As she tucked the blanket beneath his shoulders, his fingers twitched. His lips moved. One faint word escaped. Home. Anna remained perfectly still. Without saying anything, she pulled the blanket a little higher around him, extinguished the lantern, and waited in complete darkness as distant footsteps echoed somewhere above the ruined house. The footsteps lingered above for several long moments before fading into the distance. Anna did not move. She counted slowly to 100, just as her father had taught her whenever patience mattered more than speed. Only then did she strike a single match. The lantern flickered to life, casting a soft glow across the rough stone walls. The young soldier stirred. His eyelids opened halfway, unfocused at first. Then they fixed on the unfamiliar woman kneeling beside him. Every muscle in his body tensed. He tried to sit up, but weakness stole the effort almost immediately. A sharp breath escaped his lips as he fell back against the folded blanket. Anna gently raised one hand. Please, she said in careful English. Do not. The simple words caught him off guard. For several seconds they only watched each other. Neither trusted the other. Neither wished the other harm. Finally, he swallowed. Where am I? In my family's cellar. He glanced around the dim room. Cold stone walls. A blanket beneath him. A cup of water. No chains. No weapons. Only quiet care. You are safe, Anna said softly. For now. The last two words carried the truth neither of them could ignore. Safe had become a temporary thing. Slowly, he reached inside his jacket. Anna remained still. A moment later, relief spread across his tired face as his fingers found the leather wallet. He opened it. The family photograph was still there. He stared at it for a long moment before looking back at Anna. You could have taken it. She gave a small shake of her head. Someone is waiting for you. He lowered his eyes to the photograph again. My wife. He paused. And my children. Anna nodded. I thought so. Silence settled between them once more, but it felt different now. Not empty. Careful. My name is Thomas, he said quietly, resting one hand against his chest. Anna. No titles. No ranks. No armies. Just two strangers exchanging names beneath the ruins of a world that had forgotten how ordinary people were meant to meet. Thomas studied her for another moment. Why? Anna understood the question without asking him to explain. Why save me? Why risk everything? She looked toward the dark ceiling where distant wind drifted through the broken house above. Because you were breathing. Nothing more. Nothing less. Thomas looked away, unable to answer. The following days settled into an unexpected routine. Before sunrise each morning, Anna slipped quietly into the village carrying an empty basket, making herself look like every other survivor searching for whatever the war had failed to destroy. She gathered potatoes forgotten in abandoned gardens, collected rainwater, traded one of her mother's silver sewing buttons for a small loaf of coarse bread. Every trip carried danger. Every return felt like a victory. Thomas measured time by the changing light that filtered through the narrow opening above the cellar. His strength returned little by little. First he could sit, then stand for a few moments. Soon he managed a few careful steps without leaning against the wall. Anna noticed every improvement but never celebrated too soon. Healing, like hope, moved quietly. Their conversations remained simple. Does England really have hills as green as people say? Anna asked one afternoon. Thomas smiled faintly. In spring, yes. And the rain. It deserves every story you have heard. She laughed softly. I thought Germans complained about weather. We do. So do the British. For the first time, both of them smiled at the same moment. Another afternoon, Thomas pointed toward a faded ivory piano key resting beside the lantern. What is that? Anna picked it up gently, turning it between her fingers. My father repaired pianos before the war. She ran her thumb across the worn surface. Our piano was destroyed when the house collapsed. She looked at the single key. I kept this one because it reminds me that beautiful things can survive. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. Without speaking, he removed the wristwatch from his arm and placed it beside the piano key. The crystal was scratched. The hands had stopped days earlier. It no longer works, Anna said. Neither does this village, Thomas replied with a gentle smile. But that does not mean it has no future. Anna looked at him. For a brief moment, neither of them saw an enemy. They simply saw another human being trying to believe that tomorrow might still exist. That fragile peace lasted only 4 days. On the morning of the 5th, Anna returned from the village while carrying less water than usual. Thomas immediately noticed the change in her face. What happened? She set the bucket down before answering. People are talking. He waited. Retreating German soldiers are searching abandoned houses. The words settled heavily between them. Thomas looked toward the narrow strip of daylight crossing the cellar floor. After a long silence, he bent down and reached for his boots. Then it is time for me to leave. Anna turned immediately. No. If they find me here, he said calmly, they will arrest you. I know. You have already risked enough. She walked to the old wooden table where her father's weathered map remained folded beneath a cracked ceramic bowl. Carefully, she opened it. Her finger followed a narrow forest trail leading toward a damaged stone bridge nearly 3 miles away. Not today, she said quietly. He studied the map. Too dangerous? She nodded. Too many eyes. Thomas folded the map again and looked directly at her. You barely know me. Anna's answer came without hesitation. If I stop seeing people as human, then this war has already taken everything that matters. Neither spoke again. Above them, the distant sound of truck engines rolled across the village. Then came another. Closer. Thomas quietly reached for the lantern and extinguished the flame. The cellar disappeared into darkness as unfamiliar voices drifted steadily toward the ruined house. The truck engines fell silent. For a moment, the village seemed to stop breathing with them. Anna climbed the narrow cellar steps until one eye reached a crack between the broken floorboards. 3 German soldiers moved slowly from house to house, opening doors that no longer had locks and searching rooms that families had abandoned months before. They were getting closer. She eased herself back into the cellar. They are here, she whispered. Thomas stood immediately. He was stronger now than when she had found him, but not strong enough to outrun a patrol. I will go outside. Anna looked at him. No. If they find me here, you die with me. They will not. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You have already given me more than anyone could ask, and I am not finished. Her calm answer left no room for argument. She crossed the cellar and pulled aside an old storage rack that had collapsed against the far wall years before. Behind it lay a narrow space hidden beneath loose planks, empty barrels, and broken shelves. From the entrance, it looked like nothing more than forgotten debris. Here, Thomas nodded once. Without another word, he slipped into the cramped hiding place. Anna carefully pushed the loose boards back into place until every piece looked exactly as it had before. Only then did she return to the small wooden table. She placed the cracked ceramic cup beside the folded blanket. The lantern remained dark. Nothing looked unusual. Nothing suggested another person had been there. Then came footsteps. Slow. Measured. Directly overhead. Dust drifted from the ceiling as boots crossed the ruined rooms above. A loose floorboard creaked. Someone had entered the house. Anna folded her hands loosely in front of her and waited. Fear urged her to run. Experience told her to stay still. A heavy knock echoed against the cellar door. Once. Then again. She climbed the steps without rushing. Lifting the wooden latch, she opened the door halfway. A weary German officer stood outside. His uniform showed weeks of hard travel, and exhaustion rested plainly across his face. He removed his cap before speaking. We are checking the remaining houses. Anna nodded politely. Has anyone passed through here? She met his eyes. Only the wind. The officer glanced beyond her shoulder. Broken beams, collapsed walls, scattered furniture. Everything appeared untouched. He stepped inside. Anna quietly moved aside. He walked through the ruined rooms without speaking, pausing occasionally to study the broken walls or glance toward empty corners. For several tense moments, only the sound of his boots disturbed the silence. Then he stopped. Near the doorway rested a single muddy footprint, larger than Anna's boots. His eyes settled on it. He said nothing. Neither did she. The silence stretched. 1 second, then another. Finally, Anna reached for an old shovel leaning against the wall. I carried firewood from my neighbor's shed yesterday, she explained evenly. The yard is still muddy after the rain. The officer looked toward the collapsed fence where a neat stack of split logs rested beside the broken gate. His eyes returned to her. Again, neither spoke. He seemed to weigh her words carefully. At last, he gave a slow nod. You have worked hard. A faint smile crossed Anna's face. So has everyone. For the first time, the officer's expression softened. He placed his cap back on his head. I hope peace finds this village soon. So do I. Without another question, he turned and walked away. Anna remained standing in the doorway long after the sound of his footsteps disappeared. Then came the truck engines. One by one, they faded beyond the distant hill. Only when the silence returned did she allow herself a long, steady breath. She closed the cellar door and descended the steps. Thomas emerged from behind the hidden storage rack. Neither spoke immediately. He simply looked at her. Finally, he broke the silence. You never raised your voice. Anna smiled faintly. I did not need to. He slowly shook his head in disbelief. I have served with brave men. He paused. But today, his voice caught for just a moment. Today I learned that courage does not always carry a rifle. Anna lowered her eyes, embarrassed by the compliment. It was only a choice. Thomas smiled gently. No, it was a choice that saved my life. That night neither of them slept very much. The search had changed everything. The village was no longer safe. Every passing hour increased the chance that another patrol would return. Before dawn, Anna unfolded her father's old map across the wooden table one final time. Her finger traced the narrow forest path leading toward the damaged stone bridge nearly 3 miles from the village. Beyond that crossing, local farmers believed British patrols had begun moving east. It was only a rumor, but it was the best hope they had. She looked up. Tomorrow morning. Thomas nodded. Tomorrow. For a long moment, neither of them said another word. Both understood that, whatever happened next, their quiet days beneath the ruined house had already come to an end. Dawn arrived quietly. A thin layer of mist drifted across the fields as Anna folded her father's map and slipped it into her coat. Neither of them had slept much. The close call with the German patrol had left little room for hope. Only the certainty that waiting any longer would make escape impossible. Thomas fastened his weathered jacket and tucked the family photograph safely inside his wallet. He looked around the small cellar one last time. The damp stone walls, the worn blanket, the lantern that had remained dark whenever danger drew near. For 5 days, this forgotten room had become the safest place he had known. I never thanked you, he said softly. Anna smiled. You do not owe me thanks. I do. She shook her head. Just promise me you will go home. I will. And when you see your family. His voice was barely above a whisper. I will remember the woman who gave me that chance. Before leaving, Thomas reached into his pocket and removed the scratched wristwatch. The hand still rested motionless. He placed it gently into Anna's palm. Keep it. She looked up in surprise. No, it belongs with you now. She quietly closed his fingers around it again. Your children should have it. For a brief moment, neither moved. Finally, Thomas smiled. You always know the right answer. Anna laughed softly. Not always. Today you do. Together they climbed the cellar steps and stepped into the cool morning air. The village looked almost peaceful beneath the pale sunrise. Birdsong had slowly begun to replace the sounds of war. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt hopeful. Keeping close to broken fences and tree lines, they crossed open fields where tall grass hid their footprints. They avoided the main road, following the narrow forest trail marked years earlier on Anna's father's map. Neither spoke very much. The quiet between them no longer needed words. After nearly 2 hours, the damaged stone bridge appeared through the morning mist. Several sections of its railing had collapsed into the shallow stream below, but the crossing still stood. Anna stopped walking. This is as far as I can go. Thomas looked beyond the bridge. At first, he saw nothing. Then faint voices drifted through the trees. English. He recognized them instantly. Relief spread slowly across his face. They are here. Anna nodded. I hoped they would be. Neither hurried toward the ending they both knew had come. Instead, they stood together for one last moment. Anna reached into her coat pocket and carefully removed the small ivory piano key she had carried since the day her family's home was destroyed. She placed it gently into Thomas's hand. He looked at it in confusion. I cannot take this. I want you to. It belongs to your father. It belongs to Hope. She closed his fingers around the worn key. So you remember that beautiful things can survive. Thomas looked at the small piece of ivory for a long moment before slipping it carefully into his pocket beside the family photograph. I will carry it wherever I go. I know. From across the bridge, several British soldiers emerged through the mist. One of them spotted Thomas. There. They hurried toward him. Thomas turned back one final time. Anna had already begun walking toward the village. He called her name. She stopped and looked over her shoulder. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Thomas simply placed one hand over his heart. Anna answered with a quiet nod before continuing home without looking back again. Years passed. The war became history. Cities were rebuilt. Children grew into adults. The world moved forward. Thomas kept his promise. He returned home to England, where his wife and children welcomed the man they had feared they would never see again. The faded piano key remained in a small wooden box beside the family photograph. Whenever his children asked where it had come from, he never began with battles or medals. He began with the story of a young German woman named Anna Keller. He told them that courage was rarely loud. Sometimes it looked like a stranger opening a cellar door. Sometimes it sounded like four simple words. You are not dying here. Many years later, after his children were grown, Thomas traveled back to Germany. The village had been rebuilt. The church stood once again. Children laughed where broken stone had once covered the square. He searched for Anna. Neighbors remembered her kindness. Some remembered the difficult years after the war. But no one could tell him where life had taken her. He never found the chance to thank her again. Even so, he believed gratitude did not disappear simply because someone could no longer hear it. Before leaving the village, Thomas walked to the rebuilt church and quietly placed the old piano key beneath a young oak tree growing near the stone wall where they had first met. He stood there for a long time. No speeches, no ceremony, just one man honoring the woman who had refused to let compassion become another casualty of war. On the journey home, his granddaughter asked him what the war had taught him after all those years. Thomas looked out the train window before answering. History remembers the battles, he said quietly. I remember the people who chose kindness when fear would have been easier. And of every memory he carried home from the war, none remained brighter than the courage of one quiet woman who had looked at an enemy and simply seen another human being.